Hello friends, my name is AJ. We're going to be working on another practice FRQ question so that you can get prepared for the 2020 AP exam in this video. And in this video, I'm going to be going over the 2019 AP Computer Science question, which is from the release test, and it's going to be number 3, which is on ArrayList. And this will be great practice for the ArrayList question, which is confirmed to be on the 2020 AP exam. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, so this document, and I will have the document for this official by the College Board released FRQ exam in the comment section below. I also had this on the previous video, which went over number 1. Remember, the 2020 AP exam is going to have 2 FRQ questions. One is going to be methods and control structures, and the other is going to be an array list or arrays question. So the last video, I went over the 2019 number 1, which was a method and control structures type of question. And today I'm going to be going over number 3, which is more of an array list question. All right, so let's scroll to the question, which is right here, number 3. So it says, many encoded strings contain delimiters. A delimiter is a non-empty string that acts as a boundary between different parts of a larger string. The delimiters involved in this question occur in pairs that must be balanced, with each pair having an open delimiter and a closed delimiter. There will be only one type of delimiter for each string. The following are examples of delimiters. So then we have our first example, which talks about parentheses. So expressions in mathematics uses open parentheses and closed parentheses as delimiters. For each open parentheses, there must be a matching closed parentheses. So this is actually a very good example. You can see here that there is one open parentheses and there is one closed parentheses that goes with an open parentheses. Then you can see here, this is a not valid expression because you have one pair of an open and closed delimiter, but then here you do not have a closing delimiter. And another great example of this is actually with Java, right? If you think about it, in your Java expression, you should have the same amount of open and closed curly braces, right? So when I have this here, you can see that here's a pair, here's a pair, here's a pair, then the outer ones are a pair, and then this one is a pair. As I'm going through, I should never have more closed delimiters than open delimiters, right? Because in order for it to match up, I should have they should be equal, obviously, but as I'm going through and I'm looking at this, I should never count more closed delimiters than open delimiters. So these are some things to think about. And then the second example, they talk about HTML, the hypertext markup language, which is the main programming language or programming script for building websites. It says HTML uses tags. So for example, the B tag, which is a bold, and a /b as delimiters. So for each open delimiter, there must be a matching closed delimiter. And it's not valid because they have to match up with each other. So now knowing what delimiters are, and this question explains what it is, we can now move on to looking at the class that we'll be working with for this problem. You can see that we have a class with 2 fields and 1 constructor and 2 methods. We have a delimiters class, which we'll be writing 2 methods in this class as part of this problem. We have one field which specifies the open delimiter, what the open delimiter is, and we have another field that specifies the closed delimiter, what the closed delimiter is. Then here, we simply have a constructor which initializes our 2 fields, and now we have 2 methods that we need to work on. The first method, which will be implemented in part A, returns an array list, so this is where the array list comes in, of delimiters from the array tokens, as described in part A. And then we'll worry about B second, because that will be the second part of the question. So we scroll down and we can see that now it says A, so this is all the information pertaining to part A. It says a string containing text and possibly delimiters has been split into tokens and stored in a an array of string elements. Each token is either an open delimiter, a closed delimiter, or a substring that is not a delimiter. You will write the method getDelimitersList, which returns, so I know that this method has to return something. And what does it return? It returns an array list containing all of the open and closed delimiters found in tokens in their original order. The following examples show the contents of an array list returned by getDelimitersList for different open and closed delimiters and different tokens arrays. So you can see here that if I set my open and closed delimiter to an open and closed parentheses respectively, and my tokens are the following, right? I have an open parentheses, x plus y, closed parentheses, and then times 5. It will return my 2 delimiters. And it doesn't matter if it's balanced or not, it's just going to find the delimiters and return them. And then this is another example. Let's say my open delimiter is a Q tag and the closed delimiter is a closing Q tag. If my tokens are Q tag, YY, close Q tag, ZZ, close Q tag again, then you can see that it's going to return all 3 of these delimiters. So all we have to do now is write the method that's going to return the delimiters inside of my tokens string array. So this is actually a pretty decently easy question once you understand, how the delimiters work. Because this particular question, the delimiter part and kind of understanding, especially if you don't have prior knowledge with HTML and stuff, then, kind of understanding delimiters may take a second. But once you do, the question is actually not that bad. So all we need to do is we need to first create an array list to store the delimiters that we find. So I can say array list, right, string, because I want to store string objects inside of it. And then I give this a name. I'll just call this delimiters equals new array list, and this will be a string type, just like this. So this line of code will create a new array list, an empty array list to store our delimiters in. Now what we need to do is we need to go through all of our tokens, right? And then whatever tokens are matching the delimiters, either the open delimiter and the closed delimiter, then I want to add it to my delimiters list. So if you kind of take a look at what I had said, I said that I want to look through all of my tokens, right? I want to physically go through every single one. I can do that using, by traversing my array. And the best way to traverse my string array forwards would be a for each loop. So I can say for a string token in tokens, just like this, and then open close parentheses. And of course, if you remember the last video, I added little comments at the end of my, braces so that I knew kind of what they're for. So now we're inside of the for loop. And all I want to do is I want to say if my token, right, is equals my open delimiter, right, which is a field. So I can either say open delimiter or I can say this dot open delimiter, right? Or if the token is equal to the closed delimiter, just like this, then I want to add the token to my delimiters array list. Remember, to add an element to the array list, I have to use the name of the array list dot add, and then I can put in what I want to add, which is the token. So just like that, I now have the code I'm looking through all of my tokens, and if the token is either an open or a closed delimiter, I add it to my delimiters list. Now the last thing I need to do is at the end of my, and I'll do a little if, at the end of my for loop, I simply want to do return delimiters. Because my return type is array list, and in the question it had asked me to return an array list of the delimiters. So I have to add the return statement there. If I don't add the return statement again, it will count against you. So make sure, and I did say this in my FRQ tips video, make sure to always have a return statement when it asks you to return. And that is it. That is the correct solution for part A. It was actually pretty simple. All I did was I created an empty array list. I looked through all my tokens, If my token was either an open delimiter or closed delimiter, I added it to my array list, and then at the end, I returned that array list full of the delimiters inside of my string array. All right, so now we can move on to part B. And if we read part B, it says, write the this one, always, if you notice, the part B's always seem to be longer, and yep, it's definitely longer. It says, write the method is balanced, which returns true when delimiters are balanced and returns false otherwise. Delimiters are balanced when both of the following conditions are satisfied. Otherwise, they are not balanced. When traversing the array list, so already I have a little bit of kind of indication of what I need to do. I need to be traversing an array list in this question. From the first element to the last element, there is no point at which there are more closed delimiters than open delimiters. Remember, I talked about that, right? Like, let's say I'm looping through, and, you know, I found an open, open, close, close, open, close, close, or close, 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 or something like that, right? Then if you notice here, I count my open, which is 1, 2, right? And then my close, 1, 2. Now 3, and then my closing 3, 4, 5. That now goes over the number of closed delimiters I should have, and it will no longer ever be balanced. Then the second part says that the total number of open delimiters must be equal to the total number of closed delimiters, and that's after we look at all of the different items. So knowing now that I have to figure out the total number of open delimiters and the total number of closed delimiters, I can now think about that I need to add some sort of counter into my code to count the number of open and the number of closed delimiters. So now we have some example. So first it says, consider a delimiters object for which openDel is a subtag and closedDel is a closing subtag. The examples show below different ArrayList objects that could be returned, and then it basically tells us, you know, our answer. So first we have this ArrayList, right? And it says the following example shows an ArrayList for which isBounds returns true. All right, and following my guidelines up here, let's say I traverse from left to right. I look first, I have an open, so now I have 1 open, 2 open, 1 close, 3 open, 2 closed, 3 closed. You can see at no point in my traverse did my closed delimiter number ever exceed my open delimiter number, and at the end I had the same number of open and closed delimiters. Now let's take a look at example number 2, right? In which isBounds returns false. So if I traverse from left to right, my open delimiter, 1 open delimiter, 1 closed delimiter, now 2 closed delimiter. At this point, while traversing, I have exceeded the number, or my closed delimiter number has exceeded my open delimiter number, which means that it is not balanced and it will return false immediately. And then you can see here, example 3, this returns false because the number of open delimiters is 0 and the number of closed delimiters are 1. They are not equal. Then the last part here, the following example shows it returns false because the number of open is not equal to the number of closed after traversing. All right, so now that we know all this information, we need to now return, we have to create the method and finish the method to actually return whether or not an array list of delimiters is balanced or not. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we want to create counter variables. And I said that, if you remember up here, when I was talking about the second condition, it says that the total number of open delimiters is equal to the total number of closed delimiters. So we had to keep in mind that we probably need to create a counter so that we can count the number of open and the number of closed. So I can say int num open equals 0 and int num close equals 0. Just like that. So now I have two counters, one for the number of open delimiters and one for the number of closed delimiters. Now what I want to do is, if you remember number 1, it says when traversing the array list, from the first to last element, there is no point at which, there are more closed than open, which means now we have to traverse our array list. And the reason we also need to traverse our array list is for 2 reasons. One, for this part up here, but also to be able to count the number of open and the number of closed delimiters. So what I can do is I can say for int I equals 0, and then I is less than my delimiters ArrayList.size, and then I increment it by 1, since I'm going from the first element to the last element. Then I can say that my string delimiter is equal to delimiters.getI. Just like that. So now I'm getting the actual delimiter as I am looping through each one. Right? All right. So now the next part that we need to do is we need to determine now whether or not the delimiter is an open delimiter or a closed delimiter. And the reason we need to do that is because if it's an open delimiter, we need to increment my numOpen variable by 1. And if it's a closed delimiter, I need to increment my numClose by 1 as well. So let's see. I can do if delimiter is equal to double equals. I want to make sure I did double equals up here. I did. Okay. And I can use the exact same field to figure out my open delimiter. I can say this dot open del, right? And if that's the case, then I want to do, and I'll just have my open close, if, just like this. And now I can increment my numOpen by 1, just like that, numOpen plus plus. Now, if it's not open to the, if it's not equal to the open delimiter, then it should be open to the closed delimiter, because my precondition, if you read over here, is that the delimiters ArrayList contains only valid open and closed delimiters, right? I only have 2 options. So if it's not the open delimiter, it has to be the closed delimiter. So I can add an else statement here. And this will basically say that if it's not an open delimiter, it must be a closed delimiter. So therefore, I need to increment the numClose by 1 as well. All right, so now we're traversing, and I want to add my comments again so that it's easier for everybody to see what I'm talking about and where things end and where things begin, just like this. Now, if you remember inside of my different things, my conditions that I need to keep track of, it says when traversing the array list, right, there is no point where the number of closed delimiters exceeds the number of open delimiters. So the keywords here, it says when traversing the array list. I'm traversing my array list inside of my for loop. So therefore, I need to do this condition check inside of my for loop and not outside of it. So what it's saying is if the number of closed delimiters is greater than the number of open delimiters, then I want to return false. Just like that. And this matches up with my first condition. And that is pretty much now all I need to do inside of my for loop, because my second condition says the total number of open delimiters is equal to the total number of closed delimiters. And I definitely don't want to make that check until after I am done looping through all of my values and counting up all of the open and closed delimiters. So this will now be outside of my for loop, right over here. So if my number of open delimiter, or what did I say here? NumOpen, if NumOpen is equal to the NumClose, then I can return true. Just like that, because now I know, first I passed my first condition as I was looping through, and then my second condition is passed when number of open equals number of closed. Now, if it's not, right, if the number of open is not equal to the number of closed, then we want to return false because our second condition is not met. And I'll add my comments to keep consistency. All right, so we have completed part B. Part B was asking us again to determine if our array list of delimiters was balanced. And what we did is we counted the number of open and closed. If the number of open and the number of closed were equal, then you would return true. else we return false. And while looping through and counting each of our delimiters, we also check to see if the number of closed ever exceeded number of open. And if it did, then it would also return false. This is a very, very good practice question, especially for the ArrayList question, simply because not only are you actually using arrays, right? You're using arrays in part A technically and looping using a for each loop through arrays, right? Traversing arrays. You're also using ArrayList, and you're using many different methods, right? You're using the add method, you're using the size method in the for loop, you're doing the get method. So all of these things are definitely very good practice and to help you get more comfortable with the topics that may be tested in the 2020 exam. If you like the video, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more content. And as always, thanks for watching. More review videos will be coming shortly.